Good morning, everybody. You know, the 10 days leading up to this past weekend, we watched severe thunderstorms kind of come out of Colorado and roll all the way down here into the southeast. This particular corridor had over 2,500 reports of severe weather, including a lot of hail, a lot of wind damage, and isolated tornadoes. Now, the past week, we saw this development of a large ridge over Texas, and that began to reorient the atmosphere to where the severe weather was going to go. And the map I've been drawing on here shows you the storm reports from the 23rd. So looking back, over 350 reports, including a lot of hail out of this, plus 27 different tornadoes. And then this moved into the Midwest as we worked our way into, here it is, this would be on the 24th. And on the 24th, 17 tornadoes, a lot of wind damage into this area, and we also had 71 reports of large hail. Once this system got through parts of Iowa into Illinois, it deepened as it moved this weekend into a much more organized low on Saturday night into Sunday, leapfrogging over parts of Illinois, which was something we were very concerned about, but deepening over Michigan. And these were the storm reports from yesterday. So this just shows you almost 600 reports of severe storms, including a powerful and damaging tornado in Indiana. There were 4 others reported, but a lot of hail again in this area, including some very large and damaging hail down here in parts of Arkansas. Now, these storms are going to continue to press east, and today the severe weather threat is going to be over in parts of Virginia and North Carolina as this storm system tries to exit, dumping a bunch of rain in parts of New England. But I just want to show you yesterday what we saw on satellite. So you can just see the storms popping here on the main frontal boundary. Extremely windy conditions on the backside. In fact, you can even see as the sun was setting some of the smoke getting pulled in on the backside of this as well. But multiple complexes of storms, one here, one that came through Indiana and eventually got over to the Ohio River, and then look at this one down here in Arkansas. Now, as the evening wore on, we can actually see the smoke from the Mexican wildfires and then the storms that popped into parts of the Northwest and through here, as we still have yet another trough of low pressure in that area. So to show you where that hail was, this is our last 3 days of hail. Now, remember, you can kind of just take a look at the color bar here and see just the size of some of the hail events that have come through here. So we were worried that when drought began to bust for certain areas, it was going to do so in a severe way. That's typically how it works when drought begins to break in summer. The atmosphere just overwhelmingly produces a lot of severe weather in order to break past the dry barrier that's been in place there. Now, when you look back over this last weekend's rainfall, let's see, it's past 6 a.m. now. I should be able to get an update. There we go. This is what the total rainfalls look like. And again, we were concerned about this particular area getting missed. We had better confidence that, of course, the northern plains coming out of Montana and getting into the upper Midwest, including Iowa, was going to see storms. The question mark was how much of Illinois and Indiana that was going to be. Because of the timing of that frontal boundary coming through here, northern Illinois picked up some rain, and so did this part of Wisconsin. And then we watched the storms come racing through parts of Indiana and eventually into the rest of the Ohio Valley and up to Michigan. So that was kind of the concern about all of this. So we're still identifying holes in this area. And remember, some of these storms moved quickly, so the total amount of rainfall that hit some areas will evaporate relatively quickly as well. So I want to make that point. Now, farther to the south, a lot of isolated severe here, and then we've continued to watch the system that plagued the southeast all last week, delivering in some places over 10 inches of rain, work its way up toward New England. So that's kind of what we saw this past weekend. But I want to add some broader context to this. This is the June precipitation ranks by climate district. All right. So this particular map does include, because it's using surface observations, it does include the rainfall from yesterday on Sunday. So notice the areas that were missed in certain spots here continue to stay deep in drought. We've now can fully see the effect of the flooding rains from the 10 days before this. Notice North Carolina really coming out of what had been a drier start after the heavy rains that came through this past week. And we're still looking at just a tremendous amount of rainfall into this area. All right, I want to show you this several different ways, though, because I'm trying to just identify those spots that are still deep in drought. So let's do this in a 30 and a 60-day time frame. I show you this map all the time, the last 30 days percent of normal precipitation. But I want to take this and lop off everything that is below 50%. So these are the areas that have received less than half of their rainfall, normal rainfall, in the last 30 days. Now, these data, because there's always a one-day lag on this, go up until Sunday morning. So this does not include the rain that did come through Indiana and Michigan yesterday. But it just shows you how dry these areas were. And I even went and made a different map here. This is all the locations that have received less than 1 inch of rainfall in the last 30 days. Now, this is not unexpected here in the Southwest or in California or in the Columbia Basin here, getting into Central Oregon. It is much drier than normal, though, along the coast. But then if you come back to the Midwest, these large pockets that have seen less than 1 inch of rainfall. Now remember, this is just the last 30 days. This is where we're really seeing significant, crop stress issues. The only thing I think saving this is that we've not had extreme heat yet in this particular area. A few days tapping into the 90s, but we've not yet gotten there. Now, I want to make sure you see, though, that this area did get storms yesterday. So if we just take a look here and play this, you're going to watch that storm system rip through there, and that's not included in the previous map that I showed you. That comes from the AHPS data set. But again, look at the size of the storm clusters that just ripped through parts of the Mid-South yesterday as well. Now let's step it out to 60 days. This is a percent of normal precipitation map for the last 60 days, and I'm going to, again, get rid of everything below 50%. And this is the area that we've just watched from May into June struggle with development of drought. But it's not to ignore what's been happening in the Northwest, not to miss out on this as well. And then I went and made a map. I said, who's had less than 2 inches of rainfall in that time frame? And this would be extremely dry conditions for a 60-day time period here. And I just want you to see there are pockets throughout this area that have seen less than 2 inches of rainfall in the last 60 days. And these are some key acres in through here that are kind of approaching that extreme drought category. Now, what we're waiting on this week is to see where the Texas ridge is going to go. And I'm particularly interested in a pair of shortwaves that are coming here into the west and how they're going to run over the top of this ridge. Some of the new model updates have been less than generous with the way that these shortwaves are able to produce precipitation in the Midwest as this ridge kind of flexes east and then builds back to the west. We do have, for the first time this summer, I think, some real heat coming into California in the forecast. And also, we're going to watch later on this week, as I said, the ridge flexes a bit east for maybe temperatures in St. Louis and surrounding areas to top 100 degrees Fahrenheit. But in the near term, the back side of this low is still kicking a front through parts of the mid-Atlantic down here into the Carolinas. And that's where we're keeping an eye out today for the risk of severe weather. So there's now an enhanced risk in this region. So if we were to take a look at the latest forecast data, this is from the high-res NAM model. We're just using this because it is convection allowing. And we're going to see that through this evening, I'm going to watch carefully right in through this corridor for possibility of a long line of kind of damaging winds from thunderstorms here. Hail threat is also a possibility. While that's happening, do notice that we have more storms throughout the Pacific Northwest. We're going to watch possibly some storms coming out of Wyoming into parts of South Dakota this evening as well. Now we play this into the overnight hours and then into Tuesday. I'm going to play it a little quicker because I want you to see something. Can you just keep your eye right into this area? Okay, this is 11 a.m. on Tuesday, playing through Tuesday evening all the way to Wednesday morning. Do you see the trajectory of this cluster of storms right here? So as one big storm system exits New England, we have isolated storms in the upper Midwest. We're seeing storms that are trying to run over the top of this ridge, coming out of Kansas into Oklahoma, but over into Arkansas and Missouri, and possibly getting across the river. I'm just letting you know that while this may not look exactly like this for Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, this is where we currently sit with a big ridge that's sitting over this area. And it's always going to be tricky trying to figure out where the storms are going to be, which is why the latest forecast from the WPC suggests that while we have higher confidence in this area being wet and isolated storms running over the ridge here, confidence is kind of waning in an area and through here on how the storms are going to shape up later on this week. Much of the rain you see in New England, that's from the current system exiting, all right? But where the storms are going to set up, much higher confidence here and here, but not so much into this area. And this is the reason why. If you notice the height pattern here, see the ridge showing up? What this ridge is doing on Wednesday into Thursday is eliminating the potential for that trough to dig farther into the Midwest. Earlier runs from the weekend had this thing diving down farther, initiating more storms over some of those key dry areas. And instead now this ridge, as it just opens itself up, starts to just invade that space and prevent this trough from getting a little deeper. So what this means is by Thursday, where the storms were likely going to follow is over the top of that ridge in some sort of take place like this while we continue to get storms coming around this trough. But this one to the north means more upper Midwest storms, and that leaves a sector in the middle that likely gets missed out. That's the system this Wednesday. Then as we work our way into Friday into Saturday, the beginning of July, we see a broader trough opening in this area. But remember, if you're going to want to get rain out of it on this side, you have to be on the correct side of the trough. So the problem is the flow coming in the backside versus the flow exiting the trough. This is where the upper level support is to make the storms. So notice though, by Saturday, going into Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, we now see more ridging building here. Troughs coming through the Canadian Prairie. So storms here, heat west. This is the area that I'm concerned about going forward. So that just takes you out there about 8 or 9 days. Let's go ahead and look at the models here. This is the 0Z European model. So there's the system exiting east, severe weather here today. By the time we get later in the week, notice you're going to watch storms kind of run over the top of that ridge. And on Thursday, the European model is attempting to take some of these storm clusters and drop them right through the part of Illinois and Iowa and Wisconsin, down here in Kentucky, Tennessee, that needs this rainfall desperately. Do not see this and assume this is going to be the final solution. This is all the way out there to this, this is Thursday night. And then we're just going to see storms kind of running the periphery of that ridge in the meantime. So I take you out there a week, and this is what you get. So thankfully, there was a lot of rain here getting into this part of Iowa this past weekend, because this area is going to go over drier, and I'll show you the temperatures in a moment. This is the GFS solution. Same time period. So there's the European, there's the GFS. There are similarities here, but I'm just not convinced that this Thursday event hitting some of these dry acres is going to be able to make itself happen. Much better confidence here. So let's go ahead and look at what that confidence looks like in terms of probabilities. So there you can see it. This is the probability of grabbing an inch. You can see these corridors in through here that we're looking at much higher probabilities. But now you just notice there's this area in through here that we've got to continue to watch all week to see this next system evolve. What about the week 2 forecast? You've seen that our government, the CPC, just continues to open this area up to the possibility of being above normal. There are nuances in this pattern that suggest that this is going to be more like Swiss cheese than it is just blanket, wet in this area. So we have to be careful with maps like this. The European model still continues to identify a corridor here that will likely be a little drier than normal, but notice how wet it is down here across the south. Now, the GFS ensemble has got a much broader area that has better chances for storms. But as you know, as of late, this has been the better performing model. So I need you to really maybe focus on the middle one here for what the week 2 forecast is going to be. And again, that's the European. We continue to see today the risk of hazardous temperatures across the south. And here again is where we have the severe thunderstorm watch this morning. But this is going to continue to be under the influence of that ridge and therefore quite a bit of heat. Still smoke north though. But I want to show you what these high temperatures are going to do this week. Here's Monday's highs. Getting into Tuesday, watch this heat expand here. California, your days are numbered for the colder weather as well. So this goes into Wednesday. That's where the heat starts to push here, like Kansas City, 103. Going to start to push this heat farther and farther to the east. There it is, 99, in St. Louis on Thursday. That's as the ridge opens. There's your triple digits on Friday. Look at California, though, 103 to 106 in the Central Valley. And that's going to last, until Saturday and Sunday. Now, this heat that's coming into the west is symptomatic of that larger ridge that's building there. And this is some of the first heat of the year here. And it's also the first time in a while we've gotten temperatures up in the above normal category in the southeast as well. So let's just take a look here at that 5-day sliding window of average temperature anomalies. And as I get out there and just show you the first 5 days of the month of July, we can now see warmth trying to return to the southeast where it's been cool. We can see the heat building into the Corn Belt. If this is not accompanied with storms, we're in trouble. And then you see where we expect the highest chances of those storms here, reflected in the temperature pattern. Notice this though, California bringing in the heat finally. So what about July 5th through the 10th? That's what the models are suggesting here. So this is beginning to become concerning in this area if these storms do not manifest themselves this week. All right. Finally, let's go out here and have a look at the context of these temperatures. This is what the last 30 days have done. So what you're going to notice is heat is building into this area where it's avoided. It's coming into the southeast, and the southwest as well. This will be the area that starts to get a little bit of a cooler pattern, but largely driven by a lot of thunderstorm activity. From here, I want to show you what's going on in Canada real quick, because let's take you back to yesterday. More fires in Quebec here. And some of that wildfire smoke is trying to make its way clear across the Atlantic, heading over toward Europe. So there's going to be some air quality issues in Europe from wildfire smoke in Quebec. Here again is the smoke from Mexico in this area where we've had that large ridge. But I wanted to show you some recent precipitation maps. And we're going to come over here to China, just something I'm thinking about. Because parts of the North China Plain and the Manchurian Plain for the last 30 days have been very, very dry. We've had heavy rains along the Yangtze, but right here, this is a key growing area for some of the crops that we are competing with in the Midwest. And if you look out over the next 10 days, very wet in the Manchurian Plain, but notice the North China Plain still misses out. And it just kind of reminds me of what's going on in the U.S. We've had some places that have gotten too much rain right next to places that have been extremely dry. Also notice this, extremely wet weather in parts of Australia, not characteristic of the way this El Nino is developing. There's a lot of warmth and dry weather for harvest in South America going forward. And flipping this around in Europe, drier north, wetter to the south. There's been some places right in through here, especially around like Switzerland and surrounding areas, that have missed out on some of the really heavy rains as of late. The models are trying to pick up on some wetter conditions there. Okay, let's get off to a new week here in a good fashion, and we'll talk again tomorrow morning. Actually, tonight. We got the in-depth tonight. Looking forward to giving you that too. Talk to you then. Thanks.